Chrysalis by user BeaverFur. Chapter 3. Ch stared at his plate with a mix of fear and apprehension. The small meat-filled dumplings floated in a bright and dense orange soup, as if daring him to take another bite. He had made that mistake 3 minutes ago and was still trying to recover from the shivers, numb mouth and itchy throat. Spicy. To call Zunvirian food spicy would be an understatement. No, Rajan sauce was spicy. Lenyish tree melons were spicy, but this was a health hazard passing as food. He pushed the square plate a few inches away and took another sip from his drink, bracing for the impact of its deep, bitter taste. He cursed himself again for listening to Nakstani's advice when ordering his food. He was still trying to figure out whether his new boss's suggestion had been an honest one or if it had been a prank playing on his ignorance of Zunvirian cuisine. Knowing her, probably both. Ch leaned back in his chair and gazed at his surroundings. The Hall of the Four Columns was one of the most luxurious rooms in Zunvir's Empyrean Palace, with tall ceilings engraved in hieroglyphics of gold and jade that told the history of the Empire-turned-Republic. The ceiling was supported by the columns, 4 massive pillars of glass that shone with their own pulsating light, bathing the room in a green glow. And dwarfed by the columns, the guests dined, drank, and mingled. The elite of the Zunvir Republic, admirals and tribe leaders, politicians and powerful businessmen. They talked in pairs and groups, walking around tables and servants, joking loudly to each other. Playing with the steel pincer that served as a food utensil, Ch wished once more he was anywhere but here. A few months ago, he had had a promising career laid out in front of him as a high-ranking consulate delegate at one of the core worlds of the Galactic Federal Council. But somehow, in a turn of events he hadn't even begun to really understand, he had ended up in the deep ass end of the Orion Arm, eating Zunvirian dumplings. He looked back at the guests and saw his own boss among them. Nakstani was in the midst of it all, confidently talking to the Emperor himself. Ambassador Nakstani of the Galactic Federal Council was an odd piece. Like himself, she was a Sanxian, coming from one of the oldest worlds in the Galactic Council, a lush and peaceful agrarian planet that lived mostly out of tourism. Sanxians were nimble beings of thin bodies, large eyes, and smooth, silvery skins, known for being polite and diligent. But where Ch himself was a good example of that stereotype, his boss was anything but it. Nakstani acted like she was a local herself, laughing with intensity, slapping the shoulders of whoever she was talking to, drinking and sampling every food. At first Ch had found the contrast between her behavior and her delicate looks to be striking, but it seemed it worked for the Zunvirians, and they treated her with respect. The other reason, of course, was her role. As a representative of the council, Nakstani might not have had a fleet of her own, like some of the admirals in the room, but she had influence in spades, the kind of influence that came from representing an organization that covered over 40% of the known galaxy. As Ch watched, his boss bowed to the Emperor and walked back to their table. She plopped down on the seat in front of him and eyed the discarded plate. "Hey, kid, aren't you going to eat that?" she asked, already reaching for a pincer. "No," Ch answered. "In fact, I suspect the sauce might be laced with some sort of hallucinogenic." She tilted her head, looking curiously at a dumpling before stuffing it into her mouth. "Huh. Yeah, I think it is." Ch looked at her and shook his head. "Really? How can you eat that?" It's not that bad. Besides, nobody is going to tell you their secrets if you aren't willing to try their food first." He nodded. "Secrets. Right. I guess that's true." She stopped chewing and stared at him for a few seconds with an inquisitorial gaze. Then she sighed. "All right, spit it out." "What?" "Whatever it is that has you yellow-teethed. Look, I thought you wanted this position, to be here, an assistant ambassador. But obviously there's something you don't like, so spit it out already." Ch blinked at the brashness of the question. In his mind, ambassadors was supposed to be tactful and discreet. He wondered whether it'd be a good idea to answer truthfully, but there weren't many ways in which he could be further punished. It wasn't like he could be sent off to an even less pleasant destination than the Zunvir Republic. Yes, he admitted. I did want the assistant position, just not here. I applied to Johnathan Prime, but it seems someone upstairs wanted to punish me by sending me to this. Dalcott stopped at the bewildered look his boss was giving him. You think you were punished? Well, sure. What other reason would they send me here as far away into the periphery as possible? Nuxtani was repressing a laugh. Oh, you're such a cursed fool. They sent you here because I specifically asked for you. Dalcat's eye membranes did a funny twitch. You did... What? Why? She stuffed another dumpling into her mouth. Because I read your examination essay. The one where you talked about making a difference. Because I thought you'd want to be someplace important. I was going someplace important. Like the core world's not here. I see. Johnathan Prime, she asked. Well, yes. Johnathan Prime is where high governance is based out of. It's where all the grand ministers are. All the action is there. She snorted. Bullshit. Dalcott was about to reply when she interrupted him, leaning forward and speaking in a lower tone. No, listen to me now, Dalcott. Johnathan Prime? It's bullshit. Yes, all the bigwigs are there. All the celebrities. They get together, throw some large party, some charity fundraiser or something to appear in the network vids and get their 10 minutes of fame. All the while you were left to send the invites. You go there, you turn into a glorified paper pusher. He shook his head, raising his voice. Johnathan Prime is where the Fifth Accords were signed, for crying out loud. Where they were signed, sure. But where do you think they were negotiated? She motioned at the hall around them with the pincer in her hand. It was in rooms like this. This is the frontier, kid. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the real action is. That next volume in the history lessons, that next war that will shape the destiny of entire worlds, it starts here, in this room, right now. She eyed a couple of high-ranking Zunvirian officers as they passed by their table. Might have already started, in fact, she added. The revelation had left Dalcott paused, not knowing how to react. If what Nuxtani was saying was true, not only hadn't he been punished in the first place, but he had been hand-picked by her for an important position. One that wouldn't take him in front of the cameras, maybe, but important nevertheless. He didn't have time to feel like an idiot, though. If what she said was true, he had to get his head back in the game. The last sentence had piqued his interest. Do you mean the reports were true? The Zunvirian fleet is mobilizing. She nodded, stealing a sip from his drink. The Third Fleet left port 2 weeks ago. The First and Fourth both leave in 3 days. Seems like the Zunvir Republic is going to war. Shit. Offensive or defensive? She tilted her head and smiled at him. You tell me, kid. A test. But Dalcott knew what she meant. She'd explained the day before. There was a certain feeling to these meetings. An emotional energy in the air, in the way people acted, in the way they talked and moved. You just had to know how to read between the lines. He looked around discreetly. The Zunvirians appeared relaxed, joking and drinking. He saw a group of tribe leaders burst into raucous laughter, slapping each other's shoulders. Except it looked a bit over the top. And as he stared more intently, he started to notice the little details, the underlying patterns. The Emperor was talking to everyone. But he never strayed far from his own guards. The tribe leaders were joking, but their reactions seemed forced, as if their attention was someplace else. The admirals were all in their own little group talking in hasty tones, discussing war strategies maybe. Nuxtani was examining him. So, defensive. They are spooked, DrCat said. Ah, I knew there was a reason I hired you after all. Go on. They are projecting an image of strength, he elaborated. But they are nervous at the same time. It's all a facade. They are worried about something but don't want to look like they are weak. And what do you think could have caused that? DrCat thought for a moment. Internal strife. A coup attempt, perhaps. Naxtani shook her head. I don't think so. All factions are represented here. Whatever it is, they are all in it together. So, an external enemy, he concluded. She nodded. If you ask me, I'd say someone has seen a bush cat lurking around and they're all circling the plumps now. The what now? The plumps. The grass munchers? The cows? He ventured. Yes, the cows. Seriously. Haven't you ever been to a long grazing? No, DrCat replied. I was raised in Gorge City. Ah, cursed Erminite. That explains a thing or two about you. Anyways, yes, an external enemy. They have been attacked. He nodded. The more he thought about it, the clearer it was. An external menace was the only thing that could have united the different tribes and factions that made up Zunvir's higher social layer. It would be good motivation to put their differences aside for the time being. But still, there was something that didn't fit. So why not ask us for help? DrCat said. The Zunvir Republic is an associated state to the Council. Per the Accords, we are obligated to support them in a defensive war against an external aggressor. Naxtani smiled. That's the question, isn't it? What do you think? DrCat paused and reviewed what he knew about the Republic, its power structure and internal issues, trying to look at the question from a new angle. It's political. Asking for help now would make the ruling tribe seem weak and hurt their chances at keeping the Emperor position in the elections next year. You are learning. But no, that wouldn't explain why all the other factions are keeping their mouths shut as well. Then why? He asked. But before she could reply, he continued speaking his thoughts. I mean, if the message of strength is not directed at one of the factions, then who else is in here that... He paused, as he considered who else was in the room. Themselves. That was it. Clear as day, a message of strength, of unity, directed at the Galactic Federal Council. At them, too. The Republic was going to war. The Galactic Council knew. The Republic knew that they knew, and they were delivering their message. Keep your snouts out of our business. This entire dinner was a farce. A play. And they too were at the center of it. He felt a shiver down his spine as he imagined the gaze of every other dinner guest in the room staring down his back, scrutinizing his every gesture. And Naxtani's behavior, drinking, joking, talking to everyone. It had been another message, a reply of her own. No. As he considered the implications, Naxtani leaned towards him and spoke with a smile. Ah, now you see it. Why you should have eaten your cursed dumplings. DrCat nodded slowly, still frozen and with his hands laid flat on the table. His heart was beating fast. So this was what the infamous game played like. The real stuff. Threats and bluffs masquerading as jokes and spicy sauces. Ironic that he had wanted to be someplace important. And now, when he was right at the heart of a burgeoning conflict, the crucial signs had all gone over his head. At last he raised his gaze to look back at his boss, who had an amused expression on her face. They are hiding something, DrCat said. They don't want us to interfere because there's something they don't want us to know. Naxtani's smile transformed into a predatory grin, one that somehow didn't look out of place with her delicate features. And doesn't that, she said, make you just a little bit curious? She was right, of course. He was curious. The Zunvir Republic had been attacked, but they were trying to hide it. Why? because there must be something, some critical piece of information that they wanted to keep secret. Something that could have tremendous consequences if divulged. "We need to learn who is behind it," DrCat said. "Who is attacking them?" "Agreed. Which is why you have a meeting in about 10 minutes with, She paused for a moment, and DrCat could see bright yellow lines appear in her eyes as she connected her augmented irises. "One Corvette Captain Avamir of the Baplan tribe." DrCat blinked. "You've got a mole?" "Sorry, stupid question. Of course you've got a mole." "And you've got a meeting. 3rd level, Eastern Terrace. I suggest you get going," Naxtani said as she laid back on her seat, drink in hand. "Don't worry, I'll stay here and hold the fort." "Right," he said, but he was already standing up, walking out of the hall. His legs felt stiff and his movements rigid. He concentrated on keeping a regular, normal-looking pace. Not too anxious or so slow it would look deliberate. He tried avoiding the gazes of the other guests without looking like he was shunning them. It was harder than it seemed. The terrace, a large expanse of marble overlooking the palace's lush gardens, was empty when DrCat arrived. He walked past the bronze statues depicting long-dead military heroes, each with a small placard underneath telling their stories, which tribe they belonged to, which long-forgotten battles they'd fought. Entire lives summed up in 3-sentence-long blurbs. He paused by the edge of the balcony, placing his hands on the intricately decorated stone handrail. At night, the gardens surrounding the palace were plunged in shadows, and it looked as if the building was surrounded by pure blackness, like a small boat of stone floating in a sea of nothingness. And beyond the black expanse, he could see the myriad city lights of the Zunvirian capital covering the horizon, the traffic crawling towards the spaceport, the twin avenues, the spiraling towers that the powerful Anakax tribe had built in the commercial district. In a way, it was fitting that the palace representing the old imperial age was separated from the more modern city, symbol of a nascent interstellar economy. Ever since he arrived, DrCat had always been aware of the sense of melancholic decadence impregnating everything related to Zunvir's imperial past. But there were high hopes for the Republic, back at the core worlds. It was expected that the Zunvirians would be ready to apply for a membership to the Galactic Council in about 50 years. Naxtani's and DrCat's job was not just to act as representatives, but to gently steer the policymakers in the right direction, to make sure the remaining political reforms would take place before that happened. He was optimistic, but sadly the Republic hadn't completely recovered from the shock of the military disaster that had lost them their empire, and a sense of fatalism mixed with compensating self-importance still lingered. He feared that a war at this delicate moment could jeopardize everything. His augmented irises warned him of the approaching figure even before his own eyes could register it. A Zunvirian. He waited for the local to approach, enabling the recording function of the irises. He was still thinking of an opening line when the Zunvirian spoke in a thick, guttural accent. "Ah, the deceptive lizard doesn't deem me worthy of her time. So she sends her lackey, yes?" DrCat tensed his jaw as the large creature approached. No matter how much time he spent in this planet, there would always be a part of his primordial brain sounding the alarms whenever a Zunvirian was close by. Some of the evolutionary survival response. But he wasn't a small animal running from a predator across the grass fields of his own world. Galactic politics wasn't about who was bigger or stronger, but about who had the most influence and leverage. And that was him. "Corvette Captain Avamir," DrCat said with a confident smile. "My name is DrCat. I'm the assistant ambassador. Naxtani sends her apologies. She couldn't excuse herself from the dinner party, but I can assure you I speak on her behalf." Avamir made a short puffing sound, the tentacles in front of his mouth raising slightly. "Just ask what you want." DrCat nodded. "Very well. We would like to know why the Zunvirian fleet is mobilizing. You are with the first, correct?" "Yes. We are mobilizing in response to an attack." That was it. Confirmation. DrCat had to repress a smile. "What happened?" he asked. The Zunvirian took a few seconds to reply. DrCat was about to repeat the question when he started speaking again.
2 months ago, we lost contact with a group of resource-scanning ships in one of our uninhabited external systems. 2 days later, the squadron sent in their search was lost too, followed by an attack against an advanced frontier outpost.
He paused again, as if he was having difficulty getting the words out.
We attempted several incursions to retake control over the system, all of which were repelled. 4 weeks ago, the entire 6th Fleet gathered at the closest neighboring star in order to lead a massive counterattack. But they were surprised by the enemy before they could put the plan into motion. There were no survivors.
DrCat let out a breath as he processed the information. "You're telling me you've already lost an entire fleet? An entire fleet and a star system?" Avamir huffed.
"No. We have lost 2 fleets and 3 systems," he corrected. "All of the systems were unpopulated, but judging by the advance of the attackers, we expect them to reach the first of our inhabited planets in less than a week. The remaining fleets are mobilizing to protect the colony."
"Where? Which colony?"
"Yovit."
DrCat nodded. He had read about the planet before. With 2 million settlers already, it was one of the most promising newly claimed worlds, and the Republic was investing a good amount of resources in its development. "One more thing," he said. "Who is attacking you and why?" The Zunvirian bobbed his head, slow and deliberate.
Have you heard of the pain proverb? Yes?"
He had. "Yes, pain breeds pain."
"Pain breeds pain. There is no escape from the ghosts of our own past. We must fight the wars that our forefathers sow."
DrCat repressed a sigh. The last thing he wanted now was a lesson on Zunvirian fatalism, on how every disgrace, ranging from diseases to earthquakes, was somehow a fault of their ancestors. "So, you mean," he started.
"I am not a traitor," Avamir interrupted. "I told your master that. What I do it because it is righteous, yes?"
DrCat nodded.
"The tribes are wrong to hide what might affect your council. It's not proper to deny others the right of knowing their fate. But now that you know, I'm not obligated anymore. Yes?"
The Zunvirian was already turning to leave. "Wait! Who is attacking you?" asked DrCat. "Does this ghost have a name?"
"Yes," said Avamir without turning back. "The Terran."
He walked away with that, leaving DrCat alone again in the terrace. He just stood there, processing the information. Finally, he opened a line back to Naxtani and sent her the recording from his irises. "Got that?" he asked her, sub-vocalizing the voice message. He heard her response directly in his right ear. "Yes," she said. "Not much. Never heard of these Terrans before. But at least now we know where the fleets are going to." "The colony world. Yovit. Any ideas of what we should do next?" The line went silent for a few seconds, and he started walking back towards the dining hall. Eventually his boss spoke again. "Ah, DrCat," she said. "Didn't you say you were from an agricultural world?" He frowned at the question. What was she playing at? They were both from the same world, so of course she already knew. And just then he realized the hidden message. Despite himself, Dalcott had to smile. "Sure I am," he said, playing along. "And ever since I got here, I've been curious about Zunvirian agricultural techniques and farming policies. Like, say, the ones they use in their colony worlds." "Oh, really? Well, in that case, we should make an official visit to one of them. I've heard Yavit is lovely this time of year. I guess we could leave tomorrow morning." "That would be great, Nakstani. I can't wait to see how the Zunvirians deal with their plumps." All right, guys, there you go. Clearly, they are doing some work if they've already destroyed 3 fleets and 2 systems. Or no, what is it? 2 fleets and 3 systems? That's nuts. Oh my god. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the Patreon. More cool stuff coming here soon. Thank you for watching. I love you. I love you so much. I love you this much. You can't see it right now, but I'm doing like the biggest, widest arms you can possibly do. That's how much. I can't do it anymore. It'll hurt my arms. It already popped my chest. Ow, ow, okay. Yep, that's as far as it goes. Alright, guys. I love you. Bye, y'all.